So hello and welcome to the first ever W.Media DC Talk podcast, where every few weeks we'll be bringing together senior experts and industry leaders to chat and get insights into the varying aspects of the cloud and data center markets. Now, the data center industry is, of course, undergoing rapid growth at the moment. It's arguably never been more important to the world than in today's digital environment. Generative AI is the buzzword on everyone's lips. And though that trend is global, the Asia-Pacific region particularly has a lot of interesting developments. So with this in mind, for our very first episode, we're planning on looking at the evolving landscape of the Southeast Asian data center market, hoping to unravel, with the help of some esteemed guests, of course, what the next 3 months might have in store. So my name is Carl Looms. I'm the editor-in-chief here at W.Media, and I'm going to be moderating the panel today. And I think without further ado, then I can just ask everyone to introduce themselves and maybe give you a little bit of their background. So Verghese, if you would perhaps start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. It's Verghese Jacob. I'm the Senior Vice President of Technology for GDS. Prior to joining GDS, I was based in Australia, heavily involved in the development of data centers and hyperscale in particular there, and I've certainly consulted right through Southeast Asia.
Okay, great, thank you. Miguel, perhaps you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Thank you, Carl. Good day, everyone. My name is Miguel Gonzalez. I am the head of product management for Vitro Data Center. Vitro Data Center is actually a subsidiary of PLDT, which is the biggest telco here in the Philippines. And I've been in the data center business for quite some time, going into 20 years. And I went through various aspects of the data center, from sales, product management, and strategic business development.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then James, maybe you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
So hello, everybody. My name is James Rick. I'm the head of data centers and industrial for Jones Lang LaSalle, JLL, in Malaysia and Indonesia. I started in the data center industry back in 2007 in the Global Switch facility in Singapore. So coming back to Malaysia, in a way, is a bit like coming home. I've been involved in data center build projects, from small extensions, white space refurbishments, through to hyperscale builds across EMEA, and looking after a global community of practice that spanned around the globe for my previous employer. But happy to be here and to share with other colleagues today.
That's great. Thank you very much. And then last, but by no means least, WMedia's very own Sam.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. My name's Sam Narby with W.Media, and I oversee the Singapore, Thailand, and Indonesia markets for W.Media. You might be able to tell by my accent that I'm an American citizen, but I've been living in Singapore for the last 3 years now. And I work with data center operators. I work with end users, vendors, and service providers, as well as local and global associations to just help facilitate commerce, basically, for the data center industry. So W.Media is proud to work with so many different companies that are making such a big difference in the digital infrastructure ecosystem. I like to say that I get to throw a party and everybody's invited. So I'm happy to be here, a part of this activity today where we're bringing together so many, great minds. I don't feel up to snuff on this panel, but I do know I have a broad understanding of the industry, and I'm happy to share what I do know, but I'm also really happy to learn so much and defer to the expert panelists here today. So thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, thank you all for those intros. Obviously, we're really grateful for everyone to join us today, and we can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. So maybe let's get started with quite a broad question. What do you think the current trends are influencing the growth of data centers in Southeast Asia? Miguel, maybe you want to kick it off?
Sure, Carl. Well, there are multiple factors that we see influencing the data center trends, but I would like to group them into maybe 3 categories or pillars, depending on how you would look at it. First would be the consumer, of course. I'm saying the consumer because of the digital literacy of Asians, or maybe at least in the Philippines, has increased significantly. So the Philippines has roughly around 110 million in terms of population, and 80 or 81% of that would be hooked on to social media. Of course, the remaining 10 to 15% probably not have social media, but would be hooked on content that we are getting from the internet. So the consumers drive the content, or the need for the content to be localized, meaning to get a better end user experience. And I guess that kind of dovetails into the second pillar, which is the enterprise and the hyperscale pillar. So, of course, given the digital literacy and the digital transformation of enterprises here in the Philippines and Asia, for that matter, a lot has started to use the cloud or migrate to the cloud, or even hybrid setups. And with respect to the content and the demand for content and digital content, that would be towards the hyperscalers, or that would benefit the hyperscalers. So they would need, of course, to put their POPs or maybe their AZs or LZs within the region to get the best user experience, of course. And I think the last pillar would be the public sector or the local government, because, of course, data privacy, cybersecurity, and data residency is quite important nowadays. So that would also require cloud service providers to have their infra in country or in the region, just to ensure that the data is kept within each respective country.
Okay. Geez, what do you think? Is that the same kind of thing you're saying?
I liked what Miguel had to say, actually. I think a slightly different view, because, a lot of people don't recognise that each part of Southeast Asia and Asia in particular, that they're all very different countries with different cultures and with different needs. And they're also, at different stages of their development. And the three things that I've noticed in being here for the last 3 months is that data sovereignty is certainly driving some of that growth. The fact that the countries are now saying we want the data to reside on our land. That's driving a certain development proportion of data centers. The other one is, we've had this pent-up demand in and around Singapore that hasn't been easy to unlock with the moratorium and things like that. And I think during that moratorium period, there's been a lot of work done to liberate land and power, in adjoining land areas like Johor Bahru and also Indonesia, Batam as examples. And what GDS did is, we took that opportunity several years ago to be a first entry into those markets. And as a result, you can now see, we went in first, and if you now go to Johor Bahru, you can actually see nearly everyone else has followed in us giving, the confidence around building large-scale data centers in Malaysia that really seeded that whole development in Johor Bahru. We're doing the same in Batam, and I expect to see the same there. Then the third category is, there are some very interesting economies which are, like Japan and Korea, where they have their own drivers for hyperscale and data center development. A lot of people don't know this, but, the Koreans have bought an enormous number of GPUs for their own data center AI requirements. And as a result, they'll leapfrog over some of the other economies in terms of their use of AI, etc. And then Japan has got also pent-up demand. It's got, land and power challenges, but it seems to also be opening that up. So again, it's given us the opportunity to go into those markets. So I do think that there's been a bit of a lull for a while, and during that period, everyone sort of worked through where they want to deploy, how they want to deploy. And I generally think that the governments in those countries have been supportive to allow data center and digital economy to participate.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it's never a one size fits all, of course, is it? It's easy to kind of rope a lot of countries into the regional banner, but that's never usually the case. James, what are your perspectives on it? And another Brit working in APAC, maybe you've seen that as well.
I think that's it's a very interesting question. The two previous speakers have made some very good points. However, everybody watching or listening to this podcast today is doing it via a data center somewhere. Yeah, whether it's on YouTube, the W.Media site, LinkedIn, it's all running through a data center. Everything we do runs through a data center. I've often asked in presentations, how many people today have not used a data center? And when I get a show of hands, I think you're all liars. You don't understand it. Everything you do runs through a data center. So consumers, businesses are creating a vast amount of data. Just as a statistic, in the next 5 years, consumers and businesses will generate twice as much data as all the data created in the preceding 10 years. So it's a real large growth. And that storage capacity that ends up in data centers will increase. So the data center facility itself doesn't take any energy, but the IT within it is what consumes the energy. So that's one of the drivers, is everybody is creating data. The other drivers are the ubiquitous AI, that everything seems to have AI tagged onto it. As last year, sustainability was tacked onto everything. But AI is a vast compute system that is requiring facilities to be built to able to handle AI. All of that is creating the need for data centers. And if we look in Southeast Asia, many people have 2, if not 3 mobile phones, cell phones, hand phones, call them what you like. And all of them are connected. The digital economies in a lot of these Southeast Asian countries is enormous. But all of it needs to be serviced out of somewhere. We've mentioned very eloquently, the privacy bits, the onshoring of customer data, something Bank Indonesia has had a policy on for many years. All of that is creating and driving that demand, and that demand is showing no signs of decreasing, but will only continue to grow because of the use that the data has for all of our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You touched on a topic there where data centers are so critical to the infrastructure of the world. We all use it every day, and the average person on the street may never have even heard of one or know what it is. Sam, what do you think?
That's why I often say, that I build the home where the internet lives. Because people then just get to understand a little bit more about what it is that we do with the data center. It's where this nebulous thing, the internet, actually lives.
Yeah, it's easy to take for granted when you've worked in the industry so long that most people might not have a clue really what we do. Yeah, Sam, what do you think?
I agree with everything that's been said so far, that demand, is going to be coming from businesses as well as individuals. When you look at Indonesia, for example, just from 2022 to 2023,
I think it sounds clear.
There was an increase in just internet adoption by 10 million people. I'll say that again. So when you look at Indonesia from 2022 to 2023, there was increase in internet adoption by 10 million users, which was a 5% increase. So you're seeing just internet adoption on a large scale in a country like Indonesia. Indonesia has an internet adoption rate of 77% currently. So that still means there's potential for 23% more rate of internet adoption in Indonesia. And I know in Indonesia specifically, there's also the local e-commerce is being widely adopted as well and used to support the local economy. So this is increasing more demand for data centers. Finally, as mentioned, we have technologies like AI, IoT, smart buildings. These are all emerging technologies that are going to continue to cause demand on a level which we may not even be fully able to comprehend or estimate. So that's why I'm always interested to talk to people like, Mr. James Ricks about how do you design and build a data center to be able to meet the demand and scale up for the type of demand that we may be expecting when we look at technologies like AI.
Okay. I mean, we're talking a lot about growth, of course, and growth in demand. This naturally links with investment, right? We need the investment. So how do you see the investment climate evolving? What opportunities are there? What challenges do you think lie ahead? Sam, maybe you just continue as you went last this then.
Sure. I think I have more of a broader macro perspective when I look at the economy related to data center investment. But first, I'll say, as we mentioned already, it's not really fair to just talk about Southeast Asia as a whole because each individual country does have its own different investment considerations. When we look at a country like Singapore that has a lack of available land and space to build data centers, as well as restrictions on the building of the existing data centers by the government to meet the demands of the Paris Climate Accord agreement, that's where money will flow out of countries like Singapore and move into nearby regions that's already been mentioned, JB and Batam. That's why we're seeing so many data center projects being announced and built in these countries. So overall, from a macro perspective, we've kind of seen a lot of interesting things these last few years with the COVID pandemic, right? So we saw, I'll speak from a U.S. perspective, we saw the U.S. government pump a lot of money into the economy during COVID as relief for businesses as well as individuals. This led to a period of spending and inflation in the economy, which caused the Federal Reserve to raise the interest rates. So now we're at this point where interest rates are high. And also during COVID, you had a really wide rate of digital adoption from companies moving virtual, moving out of the office back to virtual as well. So now we're at a point where the interest rates are still high, inflation numbers are still high, and you're seeing these large layoffs in tech companies that overhired to meet the demands during the pandemic. And they're also looking to show quarterly earnings pretty high in the first quarter of the year. And one way to do that is to reduce headcount. So how does that affect data center investment? Well, many of these technology companies are clients. They're renting out space in data centers. So if their amount of money to invest in data centers is being limited by high interest rates, then it may affect the investment into data centers in the coming years. However, I think the demand is there. It's only going to continue to be there. It's just a matter of who are the companies that may be over leveraged these next few years that may experience some growing pains. So we're at a really interesting time right now where we're starting to see some cracks in the global economy, some issues in China with the real estate market. Japan's having some issues with the economy, and only time will tell what really happens and how it's going to all play out. But I can certainly say that I don't see the demand for digital infrastructure slowing at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the trend most people have seen. And of course, it is always worth remembering that our industry works within the global economy and it all has an impact, right? I mean, Miguel, what have you kind of seen in this area with investment?
Thanks, Carl. Totally agree with both James and Sam. Content is created on a daily basis by almost everyone, on an hourly, on every minute, every second. So at some point, the country or most data centers would be overflowing with data, especially with the advent of AI and machine learning. It's never gonna stop. But I think contrary to what Sam mentioned, from my perspective, the economy won't stop the growth of the data center business. From my perspective, if the economy takes a hit most enterprises would probably go for a shared infrastructure, which could be supported by data centers in general. So that means if companies don't find it, or it would make financial sense for companies or enterprises to just carve out their data center component or data center infrastructure and just put them in the data center that's a shared infrastructure, then it would probably fuel the data center business. So I guess it's just a matter of perspective, or depending on the enterprises that would use up the data center or would migrate to a data center. But I've seen that here in the Philippines, wherein the cost to build data centers and the cost of servers were not very what do you call this? Sorry, not very attractive to enterprises here in the Philippines. So instead, they harp on whatever was shared, meaning that was like 15 years ago, when we were still offering shared infrastructure and shared servers, and on a monthly basis. This was before the advent of cloud. So we saw a niche for that. So that said, I don't think economy will even stop the growth of data and data centers, for that matter.
Okay, it's almost like it's so essential that it's almost recession-proof, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe I could say that. Yeah.
Okay, Hadith, what do you think? Is that a fair assessment?
I think it's a fair assessment. Once upon a time, there's a story of, once upon a time we used to put gold in vaults underneath treasuries or mints. And that used to be how we used to hedge and control our currency. And that data all now sits in data centers somewhere around the world. So the reality is that, data is gold. And that's part of the reason we're seeing, the development of AI to get the value from that data. So I do think that will keep going. But I probably approach this question a little bit differently. And that is, we're talking about investment climate. The investment climate for people looking to realize value from investing in data centers is as hot as it was 7 years ago when I first helped companies like AirTrunk. We're talking about an extremely hot market, okay? And there is no shortage of people wanting to invest in this market. And they are simply looking for deals that they would consider executable. So from that point of view, I don't see it at all other than as an extremely hot market for investment and investors who want to do that. But it comes down to three things, and they're the same things that have always controlled data centers. One is the availability of power. The other one is the availability of land. And the last one is the connectivity. And those factors are physical factors that never change in this game. And, the reality is that we are really only as constrained in terms of those factors. So as we open up into the emerging economies and we're able to then get in there and deploy these technologies, well, that's where the growth is going to come from. So the growth, that growth is again supported by investment, and our own experience is there's absolutely no shortage of people who want to invest in good transactions.
Okay, it's almost like the supply side, for want of a better word, might be the limiting factor rather than the massive demand we're seeing.
Absolutely, and I also want to just make comment about a couple of other things. One is AI is the biggest hype term I've come across for a while, because I do work and interact directly with chip suppliers, and we've really got a 2 to 3 year window before we do get that potential exponential demand. So I hear a lot of the hype, and I do consider it to be hype because every GPU is sold between now and the end of next year. Okay. The people who've bought them know exactly where they're going to deploy them, and that's where the growth is. Anyone who wants one isn't going to be able to get one for at least 2 to 3 years. So that's part of my logic around why I think the term is quite hyped up. So that, and I'd also like to just correct one other thing. I would say that when I first started talking to people about what did I do, and I worked in the game of data centers 20 years ago, yeah, I would say people don't know. But I would say it's extremely rare now that I don't come across somebody when you say, I work in data centers, and they say, oh, what's that? You go, oh, well, it's where the internet lives and you got servers. I think, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that is. And, I even have more people say to me, look, it's amazing what, a smartphone does, because the smartphone does more than what my first PC did 15 years ago. So I do think that we're in an industry that has become largely mainstream and, and is largely respected. And I do feel that, that's one of the great things about working in this particular sector, because one, we are front and center of everyone's lives and making lives easier. And two, we're the great, frontier of environmental warriors in terms of, reducing water consumption and energy efficiency while there is massive growth. So, it's one of the things that I do feel that, we should be proud. And more importantly, I do think that many more people understand the critical role we play.
Yeah, perhaps by its nature, as the digital environment increases, it does become part of the mainstream. I mean, James, what do you think? And investment, of course.
Yeah, I think there were some very interesting comments made there by Verghese. There were several rabbit holes that sort of opened up that we could disappear off into, but we won't at this particular stage. But the investment climate and how the investment climate is evolving. Financial services institutions have always been very reticent about what they get involved in. They've never been front runners in anything. Just a few years ago, I was remediating Windows XP devices and Windows 2003 servers that financial services institutions were still running, even though they were all out of support. What I am seeing is a lot of investors, in the banks in particular, view data centers as a passing fad, whereas other investment organizations are very keen on what they see. People like BlackRock, Blackstone, etc., are pumping billions of dollars into this industry. It gives opportunities, but the challenges as well are for aging legacy facilities. How do they keep up with the new build stuff? We talk about the new build activities because it's really great and interesting. We can do lots of different things. But if you're with a legacy facility, how do you keep up with that pace? And the challenge around replacing infrastructure to be able to satisfy the needs of compute-intensive equipment is really, really important. I've often viewed all of this as a bit like an expressway. The internet is very much the expressway, and what runs on that expressway, be it a lorry, a prime mover, a car or a supercar, are very much like your data centers. And we all think about AI, and as Vijay says, it's the newest, shiniest toy in the box. But it's a bit like the supercar. Everybody sits and drools over it, but very few sit in it, and even fewer own it or drive it. So we need to also think about the other parts of the infrastructure that we have, and how do we manage to evolve that, and how do we invest into it? And it's making those investment opportunities appropriate, to be able to rework existing legacy facilities so that they are fit for purpose in this changing age that we live in. There's some of the challenges, but the opportunities are wide open. If you look at the Malaysian market in particular, they're going to bring online at least another 150 to 200 megawatt in the next few years. The same with the Indonesian market, if not even more. So the opportunities are certainly there, but the challenges are there as well. And one of the other challenges is renewable power. How much renewable power, lower carbon power can we get into these facilities in Southeast Asia, where the grids are particularly carbon heavy? with coal-fired power generation, etc., is not helping to improve the whole global issue regarding net zero and the reduction of carbon. So they are other challenges that we need to think about in association with all of this.
Okay, I mean, you very neatly touched on sustainability there, the other hot button topic, and I know, Vijay, you mentioned that. Let's perhaps go to that as our next question. Environmental issues are of global concern. They're becoming ever more important across different industries. Vijay, perhaps we'll start with you. How do you think data centers in Southeast Asia are embracing sustainable practices?
So GDS, we actually did the first major deal in Malaysia around renewable power. I noticed some media earlier this week about who's claiming that, but GDS certainly did the first major renewables deal in that market. It's definitely there. It's available, and even though you're talking about economies that may be still using coal, for example, the reality is that again there is no shortage of the opportunity to use renewables like solar, like wind, etc. But where we are now investing our time is we're very fortunate to win one of those land parcels in Singapore, and part of our value proposition was to create up to 10 megawatts of energy from fuel cells. And we've gone a long way down that path now. And the fuel cell initially will be fueled from natural gas, but once Singapore establishes its green source hydrogen, then we will tap into that. And so our data center in Singapore will certainly have what I'd consider some of the leading technology using green hydrogen as input and producing electricity. Now, these are all things that are, they've been there for a long time. Fuel cells have been in development for well over 30 years. But what's now happened is through commercialization, mass production, driving the unit costs down. So we've decided to do that. Was in getting our land parcel in Singapore to develop our data center. So you'll have fuel cells, you'll have solar, you'll have wind, and you also have some storage. And the question is, where will that storage be? And how do you inject that into the various grids, and whether those grids around this part of the world can actually handle that? So that's probably one of the reasons that there isn't too much storage, but there is certainly the development now of renewable real-time injection into those grids. So I do feel we're moving down that path from electrical perspective. The other perspective that GDS is involved in working with governments in the area or in this region is around air conditioning solutions suitable for our environment. So when people talk about low PUEs, below 1.2, they're generally talking about environments where you're getting a lot of cooling contribution from the environment. Now, we're challenged with trying to get below 1.3 in tropical environments. That's pretty hard, especially if you want to not use water. And they're the things we're now working on. So it's not just the electrical piece, but it's also the consumption piece around cooling. Then the final element of that is, yes, if we do go down the path of large-scale immersion cooling, there will definitely be an environmental improvement in the reduction in the use of energy, cooling, smaller footprints of construction with larger capacity outputs. So there is going to be a bit of a natural, progression over the next 3, 5, 7 years where we are going to get that optimization through technologies now being commercially available, changes in the types of technologies we might use. And then finally, but the one that's probably the most common now is renewable assets being installed in various economies around this region.
Okay, great. James, what do you think? How do you think data centers have been embracing sustainability practices?
I think there are some challenges there in embracing sustainability. And I liked what Verghese was talking about with fuel cells. I've been involved with the design of facilities at 200 megawatts that are off-grid by the use of fuel cells. It's important that we only view gas as a stepping stone to something that is more renewable. But what we need to think about is, what are we getting from the utility grid? Just looking at some data, at 5 o'clock today, the Malaysian grid was producing 16 gigawatts in fossil fuel compared to 1.5 gigawatts in renewable. So there's a challenge to go, and that's publicly available data. It's not something I've just got as a secret bit of research. So we need to make sure that we are increasing the availability of true renewable power, and not looking at virtual power purchase agreements, which are greenwash. But that's actually being injected into the grid that we are connecting our data centers to. The other sustainable bits that we've been touched on are the things like cooling. Everything that runs in the data center produces heat. We have to keep it cool, and yet we are in a hot environment. Well, except for you and me, Carl, that are sat in the UK at them.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, so it's a hot environment. What do we do with the heat? There's no such thing as a district heating system in Southeast Asia. So we need to be more creative about what do we do with heat. Well, heat and the dry heat produced by data centers could be used for a variety of other things. Perhaps the drying of biomass before it's converted to energy. People, listening to this probably like to drink coffee. Coffee beans have to be dried, and they have to be dried with a dry heat. So we've got lots of heat in data centers. Why aren't we drying coffee and having data center coffee? Data centers instead are run on coffee, and certainly everybody on this call probably runs on coffee at some stage in the day. But if we're a little bit more creative and think outside the box, sustainable practices can be brought in, even down to the way that we orient the buildings and where we put service corridors on the outside of the buildings to reduce solar gain. So again, that is reducing the amount of heat we have to deal with. There are some great technologies around cooling that will reduce the amount of heat produced or give a greater quality of heat to be recycled. But we need to come up in Asia Pacific with some really smart ways to reuse that heat in a sustainable manner. To think about water as the primary cooling medium, we maybe need to move away from that. Some areas are experiencing water stress. In other words, there is more demand than there is supply. It's something that the general population is frustrated with data centers, certainly in other geographies, and they will only spread through the power of the internet to the geographies that we are in currently. So we need to get that on top of this quite quickly and be clever about what it is that we are doing with sustainability, but not chucking a can of greenwash over it. So that's solved the process, because it has not. It's only kicked the can further down the road and leaving it for another generation to pick up. So we need to think about this much more strategically as to how we do this. We don't think issues through very well as a species. 70 years ago, we said smoking was cool. You'd be more of a man if you smoked X, brand X or Y. And yet, look at the problems that smoking has caused. Have we adopted the same idea of circularity in thinking? We've got this brand new idea, but what happens with it further down the road? We need to think an idea through properly with a full circular mindset to be able to make sure that whatever we do is going to be truly sustainable. If not, it's a sticking plaster. At worst, it's greenwash.
Yeah, not just greenwashing. Sam, what's your perspective on this?
I think for me, as kind of an outsider, I have more questions than answers, but I want to talk specifically about the tropical data center operating standards that IMDA released this last year about data centers in Singapore. They recommended they could actually, in fact, operate at a higher temperature that would save costs in cooling. But there's some issues with this. The first is that who's going to take the risk to adopt this in their data center? Will it void the contracts with the hardware? Right. Those are two considerations. Maybe our panelists can help me to answer those questions. Maybe there are answers. I just don't know them. The third is it going to come from client demand? Clients demanding the data center operators implement more of this sustainable technology like liquid immersion cooling. Well, if they do that, it's going to increase costs. These operators, are they expected to eat the cost themselves, or are their clients going to be happy paying a premium cost, knowing that the data center is being run more efficiently and sustainably? So I don't really know if this implementation of sustainability practices, is it going to come from the operators? Is it going to come from government regulation? Is it going to come from client demand, or a combination of all three? Or is it simply going to come from technology innovation? As previously mentioned, where maybe we get to a point where we are lowering the cost of implementing liquid immersion cooling technology, and it does make sense from both a sustainability and a commercial perspective to technology. So yeah, if anyone wants to comment on what I just said, I'd be happy to learn more.
Maybe Miguel, I know you've not had a chance to speak on this topic yet. What do you say?
Yes, Sam. Maybe I want to respond to that, but I'm not sure if I will be able to answer your question. But yes, I think some of the sustainability initiatives are driven by the client, because from an enterprise perspective, it would be a lot cheaper, and I'm going into the cost as well. It would be a lot cheaper for me to just put my servers or my IT infrastructure in a data center that's already doing sustainability or has sustainability goals, right? So I instantly benefit from that, but just by simply co-locating. So that way, the enterprises are able to save, but we are passing on, or the enterprises are passing on the cost or the burden to the data center operator to become sustainable, right? So from my perspective, sustainability is something that's a very, very expensive initiative. While I agree with the Vajis that renewable sources are practically unlimited. Okay, we have lots of sources, but the challenge is to store it, where to store it, and the cost to store it. I mean, it's not just actually the cost to store, but what does entail to come up with the storage for that power? Will it be just about money, or will it also take a hit on the environment? Because if you create more batteries, of course, the byproduct of that would go back to the environment, which would probably, I don't know, entail higher or bigger carbon footprints, right? So, in addition to that, I think it's not just driven by sustainability. It's not just driven by enterprises or the clients that go into the data center, but it's also it also should be augmented, or at least mandated by the local government. Because if there are no government mandates, or there are no regulating bodies when it comes to consuming power and using up sustainable energy, then I don't think it's going to work. So if the enterprises and the government work together, and together with the data center operators, if there would be certain incentives for data center operators and enterprises to use renewable energy and to have sustainability goals, then I think that would be realistic. But until we get to that point where everybody works together and understands how sustainability impacts us, then we have yet to see how this will all come into play.
Okay, thank you. I can see time is starting to run away with us a little bit, so perhaps I'll finish off with one more question. What cutting-edge technologies do you think are currently gaining prominence in Southeast Asia and the data center market? James, not sure if you've got an opinion here.
People listening to this will always know I have an opinion on absolutely everything. What technologies cutting edge? Well, I think the liquid immersion cooling technologies need to be expanded, and certainly with regard to single phase, two phase immersion cooling, the removal of PFAS chemicals, and cold plate technology, where you've got a heat exchanger on top of your GPU or CPU, if you can actually get hold of GPUs at the moment, will continue to increase. But what we need to look at is, are we increasing this cooling at the expense of floor real estate? Because if you've got a bath of immersive cooling technologies, it's taken up more space than you have with a standard rack. So do we need to look more at rear door cooling technologies to be able to do this better? And I think the other cutting edge technology, although it's not particularly cutting edge, is that around fuel. Is around fuel cells and how these can actually be of a benefit to the powering of data centers. But the biggest thing about all of this, and we've mentioned PUE, power usage effectiveness, is attacking the one in the PUE equation. That's the IT power. Infrastructure we're somewhat stuck with and is not only going to improve slightly over the course of the next few years. The one in the PUE equation is what we need to attack to reduce the amount of power that IT is actually taking. And there are moves underway to reduce the amount of power that AI takes in doing all its computations. So we need to be able to reduce that to actually produce some good effects moving forward. And I think in Southeast Asia, with a tropical data center testbed, we are seeing some really interesting stuff coming out of there in respects of what technology are really going to be of use in a tropical environment.
Okay, thank you. I mean, Miguel, how about you? What kind of cutting-edge technologies do you think are gaining prominence?
Yeah, I've heard about immersion cooling. The problem is the adoption in various or multiple events here in the country. I've seen lots of demos about it, but the problem is clients are kind of afraid or are hesitant to try it because it's something new, and that's something that's always been there. The hesitation to try something new, and of course, if they go into immersion cooling, even if it's available in the data center, that would mean probably some cost to them because they would have to update all their servers or all their infrastructure just to be able to adapt this new technology.
Okay. Vajis, I think I saw you nodding your head at one point there. Yeah, do you agree? What kind of cutting-edge technologies do you think are gaining prominence?
I do. I've moved into this part of the world only recently. I have noticed that something that did surprise me is having been based in Australia for quite a while. That's always been an early adopter of technologies. You know, we sit in a very unique spot between the US and Europe, and we get to mix and match a lot. I was quite surprised by what I was observing here. And, to give you the sort of, the range of it, in a business like GDS, we have already, we've already been deploying for many years liquid to chip cooling. It's been driven predominantly by our customers. We've also used free air cooling in the environments where it suits that. We have also used air-cooled chillers where it suits, which again uses low amounts of water. And then you've got, we are also using water-cooled chillers, which is the area that we definitely want to attack in terms of sustainability. But going back to the driver for this in the last question, if 60% of your running costs after you have built a data center are your power consumption costs, trust me, the customers have an eagle eye on it, and they're the ones looking at all of the opportunities to drive their operating costs down, and they're constantly trading that off against hardware decisions, fan decisions, operating temperature decisions. So there's a lot of innovation that comes from the customers, and we see that in the designs they put in front of us, the challenges they put to us in terms of improving the engineering, and then the long-term operational costs. And power is seen as one of those major costs that they have to pay for all the time. And, I don't think any of them is, avoiding the fact that they have to have a focus on it. The other point I'd make is the other major driver is sustainability, whatever people's views on it are. The drivers come from shareholders and different stakeholder groups, and they do apply enormous amounts of pressure into the sector. And I call it positive pressure because it is the sorts of changes that we do want to work on, and it is largely aligned to what our customers also want to see. And nearly all data center businesses now produce ESG reports, which are all independently audited. So there's no, there's no greenwashing. It's actually fact-based in terms of their contribution. And where there is greenwashing, the industry calls it out, the stakeholders call it out. So, I'm certainly very proud to have joined a business like GDS that, has got, transparency, in the NASDAQ, incredibly detailed, ESG reporting, very high standards and objectives that it's set for itself, and has worked, very diligently around that. And I see that in, the things we're doing in terms of our direct chip cooling solution, our preparedness for how we'll deal with immersion cooling when it does become mainstream, and all the efficiencies that we put into our current designs. And, we serve our customers are not just the Chinese-based cloud businesses. Our customers are all of the global players and all of the banks that are in this part of the world. And the reality is that, they're very satisfied by the sorts of initiatives we put on the table. So, I am going to have a look at that test bed in Singapore in the next few weeks, get my head around that, what they're doing there. GDS is also involved in some of the green data center green building work that's being done in Malaysia. So it's not just purely a commercial sort of enterprise. We're also heavily invested in trying to deal with all of those different challenges put on us by our shareholders, our stakeholders, and our users to try and, develop the most energy, water, and sustainable data centers we can in the regions that we operate.
Okay, great. I mean, thanks everyone for all your thoughts. We do have questions from followers on social media. I can see our time is kind of drawing to a close. Perhaps I'll just pick one maybe in an area we've not looked at, and I guess I'll just shout it out. And if you've got an opinion, just, let us know. So Nora M, what are some of the initiatives surrounding skill building? I guess this is touching on the skills gap, which perhaps doesn't necessarily get as much prominence as it has. Does anyone have any thoughts?
Yes, Carl. I do have one or two thoughts around this. It's important that we look at, what our skill base is and what we're doing around recruitment. Are we having 65 interviews for a position, or are we being a bit more fleet of foot and how we recruit? Where are we looking to draw people from? Are we insisting they have to have 15 years of data center experience? Or are we looking at other industries like oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, or taking people that are being demobbed from the military that are used to working in critical environments? What are we also doing about training people with apprenticeships, taking on school leavers, young people, and bringing them through the industry, growing our own talent? I've seen some hyperscalers, actually asking to have tenders put out to bring in young talent to work with them. People then think, well, they'll stuck all this young talent into their own industries. So what? It doesn't matter. We are bringing people into the industry. And if anybody listening to this, if your company is not doing anything to attract and to publicize this industry, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is a fantastic industry and it needs publicizing. Despite the non-disclosure agreements that we all have, we need to look at what opportunities we can do to train people, to build people up in this industry is something that is really, really important. And it's something I've spoken about on previous occasions and have written about in my newsletter as well.
I was going to say, if we're going to add to that, GDS actually does that. We every year we take on quite a number of interns. We give them the opportunity to work in our data centers, and then the ones that we think are going to fit our business long term, we certainly offer them the opportunity to work with us. And that's been something we've been doing for a while. And the reality is that's one of the few ways that we can recruit, extremely good talent. We've been able to access, instead of being able to access technician type level, we've been able to access engineering type level. We've been able to put them through, operational rotations, get hands-on experience. And then ultimately, we're thinking about offering them the opportunity to work back in head office after they've got that, because the best designers are the guys who actually know how the equipment works and the issues that you face on the shop floor. So again, it's an initiative that we've embraced and have implemented for some time.
All right, that's good to hear, yes. We've covered a broad range of topics today. I think maybe that all that's left for me to do is thank all the panelists again for joining us. It's been really great to hear all your opinions. I'd look forward to speaking to you all again. Obviously, thank you everyone for listening and tuning in. Join us again next time when we're going to be discussing certification, industry standards, and their effectiveness in helping prevent DC outages. If you do have any questions for our next panel, please email them in at editor@W.Media. I look forward to seeing you all then.